Red Bull's engineers couldn't believe what they were seeing. The RB21, dominant all year, collapsed in Brazil, and Verstappen knew it before the data even confirmed it. Just 4 races from the end of the season, Verstappen faced his biggest setup failure yet. The car felt completely broken, his exact words, and every lap in sprint qualifying became a brutal fight for survival. For a driver known for control, this was a rare outburst. The team dug into the telemetry and what they found was terrifying: a floor concept mismatch, instability under load, and a setup that never entered the performance window. In this video, we'll unpack what really happened to Verstappen in Brazil, what Red Bull discovered, and why this one moment could change everything in the 2025 championship fight. Brazil has always been a circuit that exposes truths. It's a track that doesn't forgive setup mistakes, that magnifies weaknesses, and that demands complete harmony between driver and machine. And this time, it was Max Verstappen, the most composed and complete driver of his generation, who faced that brutal exposure. What unfolded in sprint qualifying wasn't just a rough session. It was a revelation. A mechanical collapse in real time, felt instantly by the driver, and later confirmed by Red Bull's data. A team that had looked unbreakable all season, just discovered a weakness. From the very first out lap, Verstappen knew something was off. The grip was inconsistent. The rear axle was floating on throttle. And the feedback through the chassis was practically non-existent. Interlagos is a place where confidence builds lap after lap. But instead of growing sharper, the RB21 grew more erratic. Verstappen wasn't fighting the competition, he was fighting his own car. Every turn required correction. Every acceleration demanded caution. And with every corner, the performance ceiling dropped lower. Sprint qualifying formats leave no margin. You don't get time to experiment. You either hit the sweet spot immediately, or you're gone. And Verstappen, for all his adaptability, was handed a car completely out of its operating window. He radioed back, "The car is completely broken." That sentence wasn't emotional. It was technical. Coming from Max, who's driven through rain, damage, and controversy without blinking, those 5 words held real weight. He wasn't out of rhythm, the RB21 was. Red Bull's engineers dug into the telemetry. What they found wasn't just a balance issue. It was a floor mismatch, a porpoising return, and a ride height miscalculation, all happening simultaneously. The Interlagos surface had changed. The tarmac was new. The stiffness profile that had worked for 10 races prior completely betrayed them in Brazil. The car was bottoming out in key corners. Aero consistency vanished. Verstappen had 0 rear stability. And in a sport of thousands, that's catastrophic. This isn't just a missed pole position. This is a structural failure that exposes how fine the line is between dominance and downfall. Verstappen could feel every failure before the engineers even saw the numbers. That's how locked in he is with his machinery. He adjusted. He adapted. But physics still won. In turn 6, the car stepped out. In turn 12, it drifted wide. And in a 3-lap sprint segment? That was game over. From a win contender to damage limitation. And now, with just 4 races left in the season, Red Bull faces an uncomfortable truth. The RB21 can be beaten. Not by rivals, but by the very setups they believed were bulletproof. Verstappen hasn't lost form. He hasn't lost confidence. What he lost in Brazil was trust in the machine beneath him. And that's far more dangerous. Because once the illusion of invincibility breaks, everything changes. What happened to Max Verstappen in Brazil was not just a bad session, it was a mechanical collapse disguised as a qualifying result. From the moment the RB21 rolled out for sprint qualifying, Verstappen felt something was wrong. The car was unstable, the rear grip disappeared under load, and the balance fluctuated violently from one corner to the next. This wasn't a driver out of rhythm. It was a car fundamentally out of sync with the circuit. Interlagos is a demanding track. High elevation, mixed corner profiles, and bumps that unsettle even the most stable chassis. The surface was freshly resurfaced for 2025, and Red Bull's setup, particularly their ultra-low ride height floor configuration, couldn't handle the variation in grip. Verstappen radioed in early. "I have zero rear. The car is completely broken." That's not frustration. That's a precise diagnosis from a driver who knows exactly when something isn't right. The problem wasn't just balance. It was aerodynamic inconsistency. Red Bull's RB21 floor relies on a narrow downforce profile optimized for flat, consistent surfaces. But in Brazil, the new tarmac created micro-instabilities. The car began porpoising lightly enough to break traction, kill momentum, and confuse the suspension system. Verstappen was lifting in sections where he should have been flat, simply to keep the car under control. And this isn't theoretical. Telemetry confirmed Verstappen was losing time through the entire middle sector Laranjinha, Pinheirinho, and Bico de Pato corners where floor stability and rear grip are critical. He was adjusting his throttle mid-corner, trying to manage load shifts the car should have absorbed naturally. That's a Red Bull problem, not a Verstappen one. What made it worse was the setup direction. The team had committed to a lower downforce trim to protect straight-line speed, logical for a sprint format, but devastating in execution. The car was skittish under braking, floated through transitions, and over-rotated when power was applied. Verstappen couldn't trust the rear, and when that trust goes, lap time goes with it. By the end of the session, Verstappen was out-qualified by cars he's dominated all year. Not because he lost pace, but because the car collapsed underneath him. This wasn't a driver error. It was the exposure of a weakness Red Bull hadn't anticipated. And with the title race still alive, it couldn't have come at a worse moment. Max Verstappen didn't simply react to a difficult car in Brazil, he managed it with a level of control that only the very elite can deliver. When Red Bull handed him an RB21 that was fundamentally out of sync with the circuit, Verstappen didn't panic. He recalibrated. Every lap became a calculated negotiation between what the car wanted to do and what he needed it to do. That's not racing, that's engineering from the cockpit. From the telemetry, his adjustments were precise. He began altering his entry speeds to avoid triggering instability in the rear axle, particularly into turns 4 and 6. These are corners where momentum matters, and Verstappen started using his brake release timing to redistribute weight balance, effectively softening the rotation phase without overcommitting the chassis. It's the kind of adaptation that doesn't just save a lap, it saves a session. What makes Verstappen different is his ability to remain one step ahead of the car's limitations. While others would react lap by lap, Max predicts how instability will evolve corner to corner, sector to sector. In sprint qualifying, he anticipated the aerodynamic drop through Ferradura and Laranjinha and began preloading his input steering earlier, feathering throttle sooner, and reducing rear slip. These aren't things you can teach. They're instincts refined through championship pressure. One of the most remarkable elements was how Verstappen avoided overdriving. When a car is this unpredictable, the temptation is to fight back, push harder, take risks. But Max didn't fall for that trap. He minimized energy loss, reduced unnecessary steering corrections, and worked with the car's worst behaviors instead of against them. That's why, despite the RB21 being off, he still landed P6 ahead of both Ferraris and dangerously close to a front row seat. Even in radio communication, Verstappen's feedback was direct and actionable. He wasn't vague. He outlined the symptoms, the corners affected, and the moments where the floor lost stability. That kind of real-time engineering diagnosis is rare and invaluable. His race engineer didn't have to guess. Verstappen's comments gave them a full roadmap for analysis back in Milton Keynes. And that's the deeper truth. Max Verstappen isn't just winning because of Red Bull. Red Bull is winning because Max Verstappen is operating at a level that makes even a broken package look competitive. In Brazil, the RB21 failed. But Verstappen's mind, reflexes, and control system never did. That's what separates a fast driver from a generational talent. Sprint qualifying in Brazil wasn't just a setback, it was a warning shot. For Red Bull, it exposed a blind spot in their 2025 evolution. For Max Verstappen, it confirmed something he had long suspected: even dominance needs margin. The RB21, for all its pace across the season, can no longer rely on raw baseline strength. Setup precision has become critical, and when they miss the mark, the whole weekend hangs in the balance. The immediate consequence? Red Bull's engineers are now in damage control mode. Brazil's setup window was brutally narrow, and Verstappen's feedback post-session has already triggered a rethink. Ride height adjustments, rear stability solutions, and even updated floor stiffness values are being re-evaluated. Because if they can't fix it before Las Vegas or Abu Dhabi, Verstappen's final push will become a fight not against rivals but against his own machine. But here's what matters most: Verstappen remains composed. He knows what this weekend was a technical misfire, not a driver failure. And that clarity allows him to reset faster than most. There's no panic. No lost confidence. Just a deep understanding that even champions face weekends like this, and that recovery is part of what defines legacy. His mental reset is already in motion. The championship context makes this even more intense. While his rivals have closed the gap, Verstappen's consistency across the season still gives him a buffer. But that buffer cannot absorb another weekend like Brazil. If the setup direction fails again, especially in a street circuit like Las Vegas where grip is unpredictable, the title fight could swing fast. Red Bull has to get it right. No more margin for error. What Brazil also revealed is how thin the line between dominance and disaster truly is. One track. One setup miss. One session with bouncing, floor instability, and grip loss, and even Max Verstappen can't drive around it. That's not a weakness. That's the brutal honesty of modern Formula One. Verstappen didn't lose his edge. He ran out of tools. Heading into the final 4 races, the message is clear. Red Bull must respond. Verstappen already has. The pace is still there. The vision is still sharp. But this weekend proved the era of autopilot victories is over. Brazil was a shock. What happens next will define whether Max Verstappen ends 2025 as champion or as the man who almost rewrote history again.